The air inside Dry Creek's general store was dry as bone and heavy with the mingled smells of dust, old tobacco, and regret. Elena Red Willow stood alone at the flour bin, knuckles white on the drawstring of her worn leather coin pouch. The overhead fan squeaked in a slow, hopeless rhythm, pushing warm air that did nothing to ease the heat pressing down on her like judgment. Sweat gathered at her temples beneath the wide-brimmed straw hat, and every muscle in her body screamed not to look over her shoulder. But she felt them. 3 men, watching her like a hawk watches a rabbit, too tired to run. Didn't expect to see you in town alone. Miss Red Willow, came the voice, low and thick like syrup gone bad. Elena didn't turn. She didn't have to. She knew the voice. Barrett Clive, one of Silas Vane's hired men, the kind of man who scraped his boots on someone else's front step just to see them flinch. I need supplies, she said plainly, keeping her voice steady as she scooped flour into the sack. The second man, Greeley, let out a slow chuckle from behind the tobacco counter. And I reckon you'll need a lot more than that come winter firewood. Feed. Someone who knows how to handle broken fence posts. Shame your daddy ain't around to keep that ranch afloat. Elena tightened the drawstring and turned. Finally, her grey eyes same sharp steel shade as her father's met theirs, without blinking. I've been managing just fine. The third one, Jed, leaned a little too close, the smell of sour whiskey radiating from him like steam off manure. You won't last another season out there. Everyone knows it. Hell, Silas Vane's been generous, offered you real money. You could be living in town, warm and dry, wearing something finer than threadbare cotton and boots to winters past. Good. Silas Vane can go straight to hell, she said. The store went quiet. Even Mr. Krieger, the clerk, disappeared behind a shelf, pretending not to see. Barrett took a step forward. That's your final answer? I've said it before, Elena replied. I'm not selling my father's land. Jed's hand reached out to block her path to the counter. Well now, see, that's a problem, 'cause Silas ain't a man who likes hearing no more than once. Elena felt her pulse thump hard in her throat. Her fingers itched for the shotgun left in the wagon outside, but her coin purse trembled slightly in her grip, betraying her calm. And then, behind her, the bell above the store door rang. Slow, deliberate footsteps followed, spurs jingling, not loud, just enough to be heard over the heartbeat in her ears. Seems to me, a man's voice said, calm and deep. The lady's already said what she needed to. The men turned. Elena did too. Cautious, he stood silhouetted in the doorway, the late afternoon sun casting him in gold and shadow. Tall, weathered, hat tilted low. His eyes were hidden, but his presence was loud. Barrett squinted. This ain't your business, stranger. The man walked in, slow and sure, like someone who'd seen real danger and didn't find this worth breaking a sweat over. When 3 men crowd a woman like vultures on a carcass, I make it my business. His hand rested loosely near the pistol on his hip, not threatening, just a quiet reminder. Elena's stomach flipped, and she couldn't tell if it was fear, relief, or something stranger. The stranger turned his eyes to her, then blue, clear as Wyoming sky after a storm, and nodded once. She's leaving. With me. Barrett's jaw tightened. You don't know who you're crossing. Don't need to, the man said. I only need to know. She said no. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Jet's hand twitched near his belt. The stranger didn't move, but something in the stillness was louder than shouting, like the hush right before a rattler strikes. Then Barrett grunted, spit on the floor, and backed down. This ain't over, Red. You're gonna wish you took the offer when it was still warm. Elena walked toward the man without hesitation. Her legs moved before her head agreed. She passed Barrett with a look that dared him to try again. When they stepped outside, the sun hit hard, and the dust from Main Street danced like sparks in the wind. Her breath came easier, but her hands still trembled. I appreciate your help, she said, adjusting the strap on her supply sack, but I don't know you. The man touched the brim of his hat. Name's Cole Marston. Just rode into Dry Creek last night. You always jump into other folks' fights. He half smiled. Only when the odds are unfair. She studied him. His boots were worn, his shirt faded, his eyes a little too sharp for a man who claimed to just be passing through. But whatever he was hiding, he hadn't hesitated to put himself between her and trouble. You planning to stay in Dry Creek long? Depends, he said. There any honest work in this town? Elena hesitated. Her wagon stood just down the road, empty save for a coil of rope and a broken lantern. I've got a ranch 5 miles west. Just me, an old hand named Hank, and a Cheyenne girl who helps when she can. We need help, but I can't offer much. Room and board, he asked. Barely, and maybe wages when the cattle sell. If they sell, he nodded. Then, I'll ride with you. Alina paused. Why? Cole looked her dead in the eye. Because you're alone out there, and I've seen what men like Vane send when they stop offering and start taking. She didn't answer. Instead, she climbed into the wagon and took the reins. He mounted a sleek black gelding without a word, fell in beside her like it always belonged there as they rode west. The sun dipped low behind the hills, bleeding gold over the plains. The heat still clung to the earth, and dust rose behind them like smoke. Neither of them spoke for the first mile, but Elena's thoughts churned. She'd seen a lot of men since her father died, none like Cole Marston, and deep in her gut, something told her he hadn't come to Dry Creek by accident. Because if you're here for me, Mr. Marston, I need to know why. The wind had picked up by the time Alina and Cole reached the split in the trail that marked the edge of Red Willow Ranch. The wagon's wooden wheels creaked over dry ruts, and the gelding's hooves kicked up little clouds of dust that caught the last copper light of day. The sky stretched open and cloudless, wide and indifferent. Alina gripped the reins tighter than she needed to. Cole hadn't spoken much since they left town, and she couldn't tell if it was caution or calculation. Either way, he was too quiet for a man who had just stepped into a fight that wasn't his. The silence sat heavy between them until the roof of the main house came into view, tucked behind a windbreak of cottonwoods. Small place, Cole said finally. It was bigger when my father was alive, she replied, or maybe it just felt that way. He didn't press, just nodded once. As they pulled into the yard, a man stepped out from the barn, lean, silver-haired, with a stoop that hadn't always been there. He wore a scowl as naturally as his hat, and his shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbows, revealing arms still corded with strength despite his years. Hank Barlow. Thought I told you not to go into town alone. He called to Alina, his voice rough as barn rope. And I ignored you, like usual, she said. Climbing down from the wagon, Hank's eyes slid to Cole, narrowing. And who's this? Cole Marston. Helped me out of a tight spot in Dry Creek. You bring him here. He followed me back, she said simply. We need the help. I don't like strangers just showing up at the ranch. Cole dismounted. ColeDismounted.com as a stone. I don't like being shot at in grocery stores, so I guess we're even. Hank's brows rose a little, but he said nothing. Alina stepped between them. I told him he could stay for a week. Room, board, maybe wages if the cattle sell. That's all. Miss Elena, we've got broken fencing. The barn roof leaks. You haven't slept a full night in a month, and Tala can't lift feed sacks alone. Hank chewed the inside of his cheek. I'll keep the shotgun loaded. I wouldn't expect anything less. Cole offered a nod to Hank. Fair enough. The front door creaked open, and Tala stepped onto the porch. She was small-boned, with long black hair in a loose braid, and eyes that missed nothing. She didn't speak, just watched Cole with the same stillness as a mountain lion sizing up a threat. Tala, Alina said, softening. This is Cole Marston. He's staying a few days to help out. Still silent, Tala nodded once, then turned and disappeared inside. She speaks when it matters, Hank muttered, and when she does, you'd best listen. They set Cole up in the small room off the kitchen, once used by the ranch cook who'd left long ago. A narrow bed, a wash basin, and a hook on the wall, that was it. It's not much, Alina said. Compared to the ground, it's paradise, Cole replied, setting down his saddlebag. I've slept in worse. By the time supper was on the table, boiled potatoes, salted beef, bread gone, a little dry. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the cicadas had begun their nightly song. They ate in silence at first. Tala sat near the window, eyes flicking to the tree line. Hank sat with one hand never far from the shotgun, leaning against the wall. So, Hank said eventually, what brings a man like you to Dry Creek? Cole shrugged. Looking for work. Heard this was cattle country, that all? Does there need to be more? Hank grunted, unconvinced. Tala finally spoke, her voice low and clear. You carry yourself like someone used to being hunted. Cole looked up at her, then back to his plate. And you carry yourself like someone who sees through things. Tala didn't smile, but something in her eyes shifted. After dinner, Cole followed Hank out to the barn to help cover the hay bales with tarp. Alina stayed back to wash dishes. Tala dried them in silence. He's not what he seems, Tala said at last. Alina didn't answer immediately. He's not, she agreed, but he put himself between me and 3 of Vane's men today, unarmed. That doesn't mean he isn't dangerous. I didn't say he wasn't. Tala set down a dish. You trust too easy. Alina shook her head. I don't trust him, but I believe he's not here to hurt us. That's enough for now. Later, with the dishes done and Hank out checking the perimeter, Cole stood near the fence line, watching the moon rise over the hills. Alina approached, her arms crossed against the chill that hadn't been there an hour ago. Something on your mind? She asked. Cole didn't turn. You've got a spring-fed creek running through your back pasture. That's right, rare in these parts. Most dry up by midsummer. Yours doesn't. Alina's stomach knotted. You sound like Vane. I'm nothing like Vane, but I've seen men kill for less. She stepped closer. You think that's why he wants the ranch? I'd bet my horse on it. That creek's always been ours, she said, her voice hardening. My father dug that channel himself when I was 8, said water was life out here. Cole finally turned to her. And now, it's your life on the line. She said nothing. I've seen this before, he added. Land with water means power, and men like Silas Vane don't just offer once. When they stop asking, they start sending fire. She felt the chill run deeper now. I can help, Cole said, but I need to know what I'm dealing with. You got neighbors nearby. No one close enough to hear gunfire. Your ranch hand, he's old. The girl, sharp, but young. You're outnumbered. We've lasted this long. Cole looked out into the trees again, as if seeing something just past the edge of light. That creek, he said, voice low. It's not just water, it's your inheritance. But if Vane wants it bad enough, he won't care who he has to burn to get it. Alina didn't flinch. She looked him in the eye. Then we make damn sure he burns first. A quiet passed between them. A quiet that meant understanding, but also the first crack of something else. Respect, maybe trust, maybe more, but too soon to name. Cole nodded once and stepped back toward the barn. Alina stayed where she was, the night wind tugging at her braid. She looked toward the hills, where shadows gathered, and the creek ran silent and deep hidden, but powerful, and she knew now why men were circling. The storm hadn't come yet, but it would. She turned back toward the house, her voice low but certain, like she was telling the night itself. They're not after your land, Miss Red. They're after what runs beneath it. The wind shifted sometime past midnight. It wasn't the kind of breeze that passed through and moved on. It carried something sharp in it, like smoke or warning. Alina woke with a start, her skin damp with sweat despite the cool air sneaking through the cracked window. Something in her bones felt off, like the night itself had turned against them. She sat up in the dark listening. Nothing. No horses, no boots, no voices. But she'd lived on this land long enough to know silence could scream louder than sound. She rose quietly, pulling her boots on without lacing them, and stepped into the hallway. The floor creaked underfoot. From the other room, she heard Hank coughing, a wet, rasping sound that hadn't gone away since last winter, but no sign of Cole. When she eased open the back door, she found him exactly where she expected. Cole Marston sat on the edge of the porch, rifle across his lap, boots planted, back straight like he hadn't moved since dusk. His hat was low, but he wasn't asleep. You heard it too? She asked, voice hushed. He didn't turn. Wasn't the coyotes this time? A beat of quiet passed between them. Then from the far end of the pasture, soft metal clink. Fence wire. Cole stood slowly, eyes narrowed into the dark. Stay inside, he said. I'm not inside, Alina. She froze. The use of her name wasn't angry, but it hit like a nail through wood. Cole stepped down from the porch, disappearing into the dark. Alina moved back into the house and grabbed her father's shotgun from behind the kitchen door. Her hands weren't shaking this time. Not yet. She peeked out the side window. The moon was bright enough to see shadows stretching along the barn's edge. A flicker of movement, too tall to be a fox, too quick to be Hank. Then she smelled it. Oil smoke. Her chest tightened. Footsteps thundered behind her. Barefoot, hair loose, eyes wide. They're going for the barn, Tala whispered. There's something burning. Before she could finish, a roar split the air, a burst of fire flaring from behind the feed shed. The edge of the barn lit orange for a second, then dimmed as someone tried to shield the flame. Son of a, Alina cursed, grabbing a bucket and running out the back. Tala right behind her. They made it halfway across the yard when a gunshot cracked through the air. Alina ducked instinctively, the shotgun raised. eyes sweeping the shadows. Cole's voice rang out, sharp and cold. "Drop it." She looked toward the barn. Cole had one of the men on the ground, knee in his back, the man groaning as a torch clattered from his hand. Another figure scrambled over the corral fence and disappeared into the dark. Tala reached the fire first, tossing water onto the smoldering rags before they caught fully. Alina joined her, both of them stamping and dousing the embers until the smoke turned to steam. Hank limped out from the bunkhouse a minute later, rifle in hand, breath wheezing. God Almighty. They lit the barn. Almost, Alina said. Cole hauled the captured man toward them by the collar. His face was scraped, lip bleeding, one eye already swelling shut. "You know this one?" Cole asked. Barlow squinted. "That's Vince Tucker. Works up at the vein spread." Cole looked at Alina. "Still think he just wants to negotiate." She said nothing. Vince groaned. "I didn't mean to," he said, "just to scare you." "You bring oil to scare." Hank growled. "Seems more like killin' than talkin'." Cole shoved the man onto the ground. "We tie him up. At first light, we take him into town." "Matthews won't do a damn thing," Hank muttered. "That sheriff's bought and paid for." "Doesn't matter," Cole said. "This gets seen, heard. People talk. Vane doesn't get to hide in the shadows anymore." Elena stood over Vince, shotgun resting against her hip. "And if the law doesn't listen?" Cole's voice turned quiet. "Too quiet. Then we make him listen." They bound Vince's hands and feet with fence rope and locked him in the old tack shed behind the barn. Hank standing guard the rest of the night, rocking on a stool with his rifle across his knees. Cole didn't sleep. Neither did Elena. She stood at the fence line as the sun began to rise, the light spilling pale orange across the hills. Her breath came out in fog, even in early summer. She felt a kind of cold that came from inside. Cole joined her without a word. They watched the sunlight catch the barn roof still standing, still theirs. "How long do you think we have?" she asked, "before he tries again." She nodded. "Not long. Tonight was just a warning." Alina swallowed. "He lit a fire on my land, tried to burn my barn, and next time it won't be the barn." She turned to him, fists clenched. "I'm not running. I didn't think you would." He looked at her with something new in his eyes. Not sympathy, not anger, respect behind them. Tala stepped out onto the porch, her braid wet from washing. She carried a small knife on her belt now. "Not hidden, not anymore. We ride to Dry Creek in an hour," Cole said. Alina gave one last look to the land around her scarred, but not broken. Then she nodded. "I want every one of them to see his face. See what he sent." "You sure?" Cole asked. "I'm done hiding, and I want the whole town to hear what he tried to do." She looked at Cole one more time, her jaw set. "We ride at dawn and drag this bastard through the heart of Dry Creek." The ride into Dry Creek was quieter than it should have been. The rising sun stretched long across the dirt road, painting their shadows behind them like ghosts that wouldn't let go. Alina rode up front, spine straight, jaw tight. Beside her, Cole rode with one hand on the reins, the other resting on his thigh near the revolver strapped to his hip. He didn't speak, and she didn't ask him to. Behind them, the old wagon creaked under the weight of their prisoner. Vince Tucker sat bound and gagged, wrists tied to the wooden rails, his eyes darting between the trees that lined the trail, like maybe the woods might come alive and save him. They reached town. Just after 7 a.m. most shops were still shuttered, but the bakery's chimney was puffing flour-sweet smoke, and a few townsfolk were already drifting about sweeping porches, hauling sacks of feed, pretending not to stare, but stare they did, because it's not every day. Someone rolls into town with a half-blooded man trussed up in their wagon like a hunted hog. "Let them look," Alina said under her breath. Cole didn't respond. He was already watching the sheriff's office, small brick building next to the barber, flag out front hanging limp in the still air. Sheriff Matthews stood in the doorway, cup of coffee in hand, squinting like the sun itself offended him. He saw the wagon and frowned, didn't move. Cole dismounted. Alina followed. The crowd had started to form 5 or 6 people at first, then more. Men from the feed store, women from the post office, even the pastor's boy, standing barefoot on the steps of the church with his arms crossed tight across his chest. Sheriff, Alina called out, "We've got something that belongs in your office." Matthews took a sip of his coffee like it was a negotiation tactic. "What am I looking at here?" "His name's Vince Tucker. Last night he tried to burn my barn down. We caught him in the act. He's one of Vane's." Murmurs spread like prairie fire. Matthews set the cup down and stepped off the porch. "That's so. Got a confession out of him before he passed out," Hank said, stepping down from the wagon. "Said Vane told him to scare us. Set a little fire, make us fold." Matthews sighed and rubbed his face. "You know how this looks, Alina. You bring a man into town hog-tied, claiming he confessed. That ain't exactly standard law enforcement." Cole stepped forward. "So what would be, Sheriff, waiting till she's burned out of her own home before you lift a finger? I don't know who the hell you are. I'm the man who put a stop to this before someone got killed." Matthews squared his shoulders. "Dry Creek's a quiet town. We don't settle things with public parades." "Maybe that's been the problem," Elena said. "Too much quiet while Vane buys up every lawman, fence post, and water right from here to the state line." Gasps, then silence. Matthews looked around, at the faces gathering, at the way they looked at Elena now, and then at Vince, who still hadn't said a word. Then came a voice from the back of the crowd, gravelly, commanding. "Sounds like she's got more backbone than the whole sheriff's office combined." Heads turned. A man pushed through the crowd slowly, leaning on a cane, but walking like someone who didn't need anyone's permission to speak. "Sheriff Amos Dunley, retired, but not forgotten." "Elena," he nodded. "Cole Marston, ain't it?" Cole stiffened slightly. "You know me. I remember your father better. Jack Marsden. Good man. Got run off his land south of Laramie, if I recall." Cole nodded once. Elena looked between them, piecing together more than what was said. Dunley turned to Matthews. "You gonna do your damn job, or shall I find my badge again and remind this town what justice looks like?" Matthews hesitated, then held out a hand. "Put him in the cell. We'll sort this by the book." Vince groaned as Cole and Hank hauled him out of the wagon. Elena noticed how the crowd had swelled nearly to a dozen now. Farmers, ranchers, a few business owners. The town was watching, really watching. And just then, Silas Vane arrived. He stepped from a gleaming black buggy, drawn by a well-groomed bay mare. His coat was pressed, his boots polished. He looked like money, and smelled like danger. "Well," he drawled, "seems I've missed a parade." Elena stiffened. Cole's hand hovered near his sidearm. "Miss Red Willow," Silas nodded with mock respect. "I heard there was some trouble out at your ranch. You should have sent word. I might have offered assistance. You sent Vince Tucker." Silas looked genuinely confused. "Did I?" Cole stepped in. He confessed, out loud, in front of 3 witnesses. Silas looked to Matthews. "Now, Sheriff, I do hope we're not locking up one of my employees based on hearsay." Matthews shifted. "We'll be talking a formal statement." "That man's had 3 drinks before breakfast every day since the war," Silas said. "You really gonna hang your hat on his word?" "I got more than that," Elena said. "I've got fire damage, burn marks on the barn, and rope burns on my hand from pulling your boy off the blaze. You want to try and spin that too?" Silas smirked. "You always did have a flair for drama." Then came a voice, soft but firm, from the left. "My people know what it's like to be burned out of their homes." Tala stepped forward from the crowd, arms crossed, chin high. "My grandfather had water rights along Elk Creek. A man like you came along and said it wasn't his anymore. Next spring, our land was under someone else's fence." "More murmurs." Silas's smile faded slightly. "She ain't wrong," a voice called. "My cousins. Placevane took that well when he couldn't pay the new taxes." "You shut your mouth, Pete," Silas barked. "You're just bitter 'cause I outbid you." The crowd was turning. Elena saw it, felt it. This wasn't about her ranch anymore. It was about every injustice this man had cloaked in paperwork. And Silver Dunley looked around and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe it's time we hold a community hearing. Let folks speak their piece, in the old hall, tomorrow at noon." Matthews flinched. "You can't just—" "I damn well can," Dunley said, "unless you'd like to be the one standing between this town and its conscience." Silas looked around, realizing he was no longer the biggest man in the room. "You're making a public mistake," he said to Elena, cold as a winter stream. She stepped toward him, close enough he could see the anger in her eyes. "No, Mr. Vane," she said. "I'm finally making it loud enough for everyone to hear." Cole moved to her side. The crowd shifted. Silas turned and walked back to his buggy, but not before glaring over his shoulder. It wasn't over, but for the first time, it wasn't just Elena's fight, it was Dry Creek's, and tomorrow, they'd all be called to answer. The town hall hadn't been this full since the flood of '78. The wooden floor groaned under boots and spurs. and the windows, usually thrown wide in the morning heat, were now shut to keep the whispers in. The air smelled of dust, sweat, and tension. People lined the walls, stood in doorways, leaned forward in chairs like they might miss something important if they so much as blinked. Alina stood at the front, flanked by Cole on one side and Sheriff Amos Dunley on the other. Her hands were steady, but her chest thrummed like hooves on hard earth. Behind them sat Silas Vane, polished and smug, arms folded over his pressed jacket, like a man already bored with the proceedings. On his right was his lawyer, a pinched man from Carson City, with slicked back hair and a stack of ledgers no one had asked to see. Sheriff Matthews sat a row behind them, gaze fixed on the floor, trying not to meet anyone's eyes. Dunley stepped up first. "I called this hearing," he said, voice carrying like a sermon, "not to play judge, but to let this town hear the truth. For too long, things have gone quiet when they should have gone loud. That ends today." A murmur of agreement rolled through the room. He turned to Alina. "Miss Redwood, tell us what happened." Alina nodded, stepping forward. Her voice didn't shake. 3 nights ago, 3 men showed up on my property. One tried to set my barn on fire. We caught him in the act. His name is Vince Tucker. He works for Mr. Vane. She let the words settle. We stopped the fire, tied him up, took him to Sheriff Matthews. That's the short of it. The long version: my father died last year, left me that ranch. Since then, Mr. Vane's been circling like a crow over a dying horse. First, he offered money, then pressure, then fire. All eyes were on her now. She pointed toward Vince, seated near the back, bruised but present under guard. He admitted, Vane gave the order, that it was meant to scare me off the land. Vince shifted but said nothing. He hadn't said much since the arrest, but his silence screamed just as loud. Silas stood before anyone could speak. "May I?" Dunley gave a curt nod. Silas moved with practiced calm, like a man used to audiences and victories. "Let's not pretend we're not all friends here," he began, flashing a tight smile. "Dry Creek's a small town. We all know each other. We've done business together, broken bread, raised barns and buried kin, and I've always tried to help where I could, including Miss Red Willow." He gestured toward her, as if she were a lost child. "I offered to buy her land, fair price, good price, because her father owed debts I helped settle, mind you, but she refused. That's her right. I respected it." He looked back to the crowd. "But now I'm accused of sending men to commit arson, based on the word of a drunk ranch hand and a stranger with a revolver and a chip on his shoulder." All eyes turned to Cole Marston. Alina stiffened. Silas smiled like he'd just played the winning card. "Mr. Marston, that is your name, isn't it? Strange how you show up just when trouble starts. No one seems to know where you came from, but I do." He turned, slow and theatrical. "You're the boy from Laramie, Jack Marston's son, the one who watched his father's ranch burn to the ground when he couldn't pay the new water rights." Cole didn't move. Silas kept going. "You've been following me for years, haven't you? Stirring trouble, looking for payback. Don't deny it." The room shifted. Whispers, eyes narrowing. Cole stepped forward, calm and clear. "I won't deny it." Elena's heart kicked up in her chest. Cole's voice was steady as ever. "My father was Jack Marston. He built a life in Laramie. He raised cattle, paid his dues. But when Silas Vane found out we had a spring under our land, everything changed." He looked directly at Vane. "You sent a claim team with forged paperwork. My father tried to fight it. One night, our barn burned. My mother didn't make it out. A hush fell. Even Vane didn't smile now. I followed you because justice didn't. I didn't come to Dry Creek looking for vengeance. But when I saw what you were doing here," to her, he nodded at Alina, "I couldn't stay quiet." Dunley spoke next, voice low. "And what proof do you have?" Cole met his gaze. "None that would matter in a courtroom owned by men like him. Just the scars, and the fire, and now." A witness. Heads turned. A sound came from the door. A man stepped in, limping, face gaunt, hat in hand, eyes hollowed by guilt and years. Alina recognized him. One of the men who had fled the night of the fire. His voice shook. "Name's Ray Hatcher. I was there that night. Vane paid us to torch the barn. We were supposed to leave signs that made it look like rot, but it went bad. Real bad." Gasps. Dunley stood straighter. Hatcher continued. "He said make it look like an accident, but fire don't follow rules. One spark too many. Whole place went up. I ran for years, but I saw her in town the other day." He pointed to Alina. and it was like seeing a ghost. I couldn't live with it anymore. Elena's chest tightened. The room buzzed anger, shock, disbelief. Dunley turned to Silas. Anything to say to that? Silas, for the first time, looked uncertain. His lawyer stood up, whispering fast in his ear. Silas nodded, tried to recompose himself. "These are accusations," he said, "from fugitives, drunks, people with nothing to lose. You believe them over me?" And then, slowly, someone in the crowd stood. A woman, then a man, then another, all looking at Silas, all silent, but no longer blind. Elena stepped forward again, the weight of the moment pressing into her shoulders, but lifting something in her chest. "I didn't come here to beg. I didn't come here to accuse without cause. I came because I'm done being silent. Because land like mine, it's not just dirt, it's memory, and men like you can't bury memory." She turned to the room. "And if we let him burn me out, he'll do it to the next one, and the next, until there's nothing left but his fences." No one cheered, no one clapped, but the silence was loud with agreement. Dunley spoke. "Finsk Tucker is hereby placed under formal arrest for attempted arson, and Mr. Silas Vane, you're under investigation for conspiracy and property crimes. You'll be held for questioning until a circuit judge arrives." Silas took a step forward, rage blooming. "You have no authority." Dunley drew his badge from his coat. "I'm reactivating my commission, effective immediately. Try me." Matthews sat down without a word. Cole placed a hand gently on Elena's arm as deputies approached Silas. He leaned in, just enough for her to hear. "You stood your ground." She didn't look at him, just whispered back, voice steel. "You tried to bury us under fire, Silas, but we're still standing." And they were, all of them, but the fire had only been the beginning. The real test was what came next. The sky cracked open, the next day with a storm that never came. Lightning forked across the distant plains, but not a drop of rain touched the red clay of Red Willow Ranch. The wind picked up, dry and restless, tossing dust against the windows and whistling through the eaves like a warning too old to name. Cole stood at the fence line, sleeves rolled, hat low. He hadn't said more than a handful of words since they got back from town. Elena watched from the porch, arms crossed over her chest, one boot resting on the top step. Something about the quiet was louder now, not uncomfortable but expectant. Tala moved past her, carrying a bucket of water from the pump, her braid dusted with grit from the wind. She glanced at Cole, then at Elena, then said without turning, "He's not staying." Elena stiffened. "He hasn't said that. He doesn't have to." Tala set the bucket down and wiped her hands. "Men like him don't grow roots. They don't unpack saddlebags." Elena didn't answer. She didn't have to, because Tala was right-hand. Elena hated that she understood why. Cole finally turned and walked toward the house, boots crunching dry gravel. "I fixed the south fence," he said. "One of the posts was rotted clean through." "I was going to do that tomorrow," Elena replied. "You were going to put it off," he said, "like you always do with the ones that remind you of your father." She blinked, caught off guard. He didn't apologize, just looked her in the eye, and in his face she saw something that hadn't been there before. Not distance, not pity, something older, something shared. "Elena," he said, "you don't have to carry all of it alone." Her voice came soft. "Maybe not, but most days it still feels like I do." Cole glanced toward the hills, then back at her. "There's something I didn't tell you." She stiffened. "What now?" "Before I came to Dry Creek, I stopped in Eagle Hollow. Heard word Vane was sniffing round these parts again, that he'd bought out the assessor's office in Dry Creek, buried land surveys, rewrote water rights under dummy names, and I found records, letters, deeds, logs of payments, enough to raise hell in front of a judge, but it won't matter if someone doesn't testify to how he did it." Elena narrowed her eyes. "You're thinking of leaving. I'm thinking of finishing what I started, by going after him outside this town. He's got friends in 3 counties. Elena, people who'll bury the truth, unless someone's willing to dig with both hands and no backup." She stepped down off the porch. "You don't have to be the one to do it. I do." She shook her head. "You think because of your father, your mother, what happened back in Laramie, this is your redemption arc." "No," he said quietly. "This is my reckoning." Elena looked away, lips tight, jaw clenched against a wave of emotion she couldn't name. Behind her, Tala stood still as stone. "What happens to us?" Elena asked finally. Cole's voice was steady. "You survive. You keep your land. You make it yours again, not his. Not your father's, yours. She stepped closer. The wind tugged her hair loose from its tie. And what happens to you, Cole Marston? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a weathered leather journal. This belonged to my father. It's got records, names, witnesses, dates. It might help if Vane tries anything else here. He handed it to her. His fingers brushed hers, calloused and sure, and Alina felt it, the weight of every goodbye that never said itself out loud. That evening, they gathered in the barn with Hank and Tala, fixing the last of the broken gate hinges. Hank moved slower than he used to, but still worked with stubborn pride. Tala barely spoke, but her eyes followed everything. As dusk settled, a rider approached her, courier from the circuit judge's office in Cheyenne. He carried word that Silas Vane had been temporarily released under house restriction due to lack of formal charges. The room went still. So he's free? Hank asked, voice low and bitter. For now, Cole said. He won't wait long. Tala added. Alina gripped the rail. He'll come for us again. Cole looked at her, jaws set. Then we be ready. Later that night, Cole sat on the porch, oil lamp burning beside him. He wrote a single letter, folded it, and tucked it inside the journal he'd given Alina. He didn't tell her what it said. Alina came out barefoot, blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She sat beside him, silent at first. The lamplight flickered across her face, softening everything. Were you ever going to tell me you were leaving? She asked. I didn't know how. I would have understood. He looked at her. Would you have tried to stop me? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Instead, she said, Tala thinks you're scared to stay. Is she wrong? He waited, and then, for the first time, Alina reached out. Her hand found his, firm and warm. You don't have to fix the past to deserve the present, she said. Cole's throat tightened. He looked away toward the dark hills. Tomorrow, Vane comes for your land, he said. But I'm not leaving until he answers for mine. She leaned her head against his shoulder. The wind soft now, the storm still waiting out there beyond the hills. Neither of them spoke again. They didn't have to, because something had been decided in that silence. And the next time Silas Vane came riding toward Red Willow Ranch, he wouldn't find a woman alone or a stranger passing through. He'd find resistance, and maybe something else. Vane didn't believe in people who stayed, people who fought, people with nothing left to lose, except each other. The morning broke sharp and blue, too still. The kind of still that made animals quiet, made birds wait in the trees, the kind of still that told a body something was coming long before it crested the horizon. Alina stood in the front yard, boots planted in the dirt her father once walked. Her shotgun rested in the crook of her arm. She wore her father's old dust-faded leather, stiff at the shoulders, and her braid was tight, coiled down her back like a rope ready to snap. Tala stood beside her, bow in hand, a quiver slung across her back. She didn't blink much, didn't fidget, just watched the road like it might speak first. Cole and Hank were up on the ridge, hidden behind the outcrop overlooking the valley trail that led straight to Red Willow Ranch. They'd been there since before sunup. They were ready because they knew what Vane would do now. He'd skip the lawyers, skip the bribes, skip the fire. He'd bring guns. And sure enough, just after 7, dust kicked up in the east. Alina didn't move. Riders, Tala said. 4, no, 5. Wagon in back. Covered men or weapons in that wagon? Alina asked. Could be both. Alina exhaled slowly. The air tasted like rust. Cole watched from the ridge, his rifle propped and steady. They're coming fast, Hank said beside him. That ain't no courtesy call. Cole didn't answer. He adjusted the sight, lined up the lead rider, tall, wide-shouldered, familiar. Silas Vane. He'd come himself. That was either pride or desperation. Maybe both. They don't stop at the gate, Hank said. We light the fuse. Cole nodded. Only if they crossed the line. Below, Vane and his men reached the gate but didn't stop. They passed through like they owned it. Alina narrowed her eyes. They're not even pretending anymore. Tala raised her bow. Hold, Alina said. Let him speak first. Let him show his hand. Vane pulled his horse to a stop 10 yards out. Dust settled around him like smoke. His coat was dark, his gloves clean. Too clean for a man coming to threaten. Alina Red Willow, he called out, voice rich and casual. Still holding court on stolen land, I see. She stepped forward 2 paces, loud enough for him to hear the crunch of her boots. This land's mine. You know it. I know it. and the town knows it now, too. Vane smiled like a man in on a joke no one else got. Oh, sure. Dry Creek's full of good intentions, but intentions don't stop bullets. He nodded to one of the men beside the wagon. The canvas was pulled back. 2 men inside, armed, one with a repeater rifle already, aimed toward the house. Alina didn't blink. You planning to kill me in broad daylight, Silas? Vane shrugged. I don't plan to kill anyone, but I'll tell you this plain. You walk off this land today quiet, no fuss, and no one gets hurt. You keep standing there like you're the law. Well, I can't guarantee things won't turn ugly, Tala whispered. He's trying to make us fire first. I know, Alina murmured. Up on the ridge, Cole breathed slow through his nose. You see what I see? He asked Hank. Yeah, the old man said. Man on the left keeps signaling with his knee. He's ready to ride hard at the porch. Flank rush. If we drop the lead rider first, the rest scatter, unless they're paid not to. Cole didn't blink. Then we finish what we started. Below, Vane dismounted, took a few steps forward, hands open like some kind of twisted preacher. I'm giving you a way out. Alina, don't make this your last stand. She stepped forward, one boot beyond the threshold of the porch. I'm not the one with the problem. Silas, he stopped walking. You think that rifle in the hills makes you safe. I think your arrogance makes you sloppy. Silas's smile fell. Alina raised her voice, loud enough for Cole to hear. Now, a shot cracked from the ridge. The man beside the wagon went down, hard rifle flying from his hands. Before the others could react, 2 more shots rang out. One clipped a rider's shoulder. Another knocked a pistol clean out of a man's grip. Panic. One rider took off back down the trail. Another dove behind the wagon, shouting. Silas turned, hand going for his revolver. Bang. Alina fired once, the blast echoing like thunder. A hole opened in the dirt inches from Silas's boot. He froze. You raise that gun, she warned. You won't have time to regret it. Cole and Hank moved fast down the ridge, rifles ready. Tala stayed high, arrows drawn. Within seconds, the entire situation flipped. Silas stood, unarmed now, surrounded. Alina walked to him, slow and steady. You brought guns to a home. You brought fire to my barn. You came here to end something that never belonged to you. Silas's eyes were wild now. You think you've won? She leaned in. I don't think. I know. He looked past her to the house, to the ridge, to the people he'd underestimated. And for the first time, Silas Vane looked afraid. Cole stepped beside her, rifle lowered but firm. You've got a choice, Vane, he said. You walk off this land and never look back, or we drag you to the judge with blood on your boots. Silas opened his mouth, then closed it. The man who had swaggered into Red Willow Ranch didn't leave that way. He mounted his horse, broken quiet, and rode off with the men who hadn't fled. The storm they'd been waiting for. It passed, but only because they stood their ground. That night, the 4 of them sat on the porch. No one spoke for a long time, just watched the horizon burn gold with the last light of day. Hank finally muttered, "Been a hell of a week." Tala smiled, rare, small, real. Cole looked at Alina, something unreadable in his eyes. "You saved more than land today," he said. "You saved a place people can belong to." Alina didn't reply right away, just watched the wind in the grass. Then, he came for a piece of dirt. He left knowing it has a soul. And in that silence, under that fading sky, they all knew the real fight was just beginning. The days that followed were quiet in a way they hadn't been for a long time. Not silent, there were still fences to mend, stock to feed, land to walk and care for, but quiet in the way that let a person breathe again. The kind of quiet that comes not from the absence of danger, but from the presence of peace. Hard-earned Red Willow Ranch stood whole. The barn bore black scars from the night of the fire, but the roof had been patched, and the scent of fresh hay had returned. The creek still ran clear, winding its way through the back pasture like a silent promise, and Alina Red Willow stood straighter when she walked it now, not out of defiance, but ownership. This land was hers, not just because of blood, but because she had chosen it, fought for it, and won. Cole stayed. At first, just a few more days, then a week, then 2. He didn't say it out loud, but Alina noticed he stopped packing his saddlebag every morning. He started mending things that didn't need fixing, replaced a fence post that wasn't rotten, painted the porch railing without being asked. He'd begun to in his own way. One evening, after the sun had gone down and the air turned soft with summer, Alina found him by the old corral, working the latch on a gate that squeaked even when it was brand new. Thinking about riding out, she asked. Cole paused, shook his head. Thinking about staying put, he said. That's scarier. She smiled at that. You've always been afraid of stillness. No, he said, just never trusted it. Well, she said, walking toward him, this kind holds. They sat on the rail, looking out at the pasture. The cattle had settled. The stars were starting to blink into place above them. You ever think about what comes next? She asked. Cole nodded. I used to think it was revenge, that once I saw Vane fall, I'd feel something. Relief, maybe, but it didn't come like that. What did come? He looked over at her, soft eyes in a weathered face. You? She didn't reply, just reached out and took his hand. Behind them, the house was warm with light. Hank was inside, nodding off in a chair with a book in his lap. Tala sat cross-legged on the floor, sketching something in charcoal on an old scrap of canvas. They weren't family by blood, but they were something deeper now. Chosen. Later that night, Alina found her father's journal again. She flipped through pages of cattle notes, weather reports, hand-sketched maps. At the very back was a line he'd once written to her, in the margins of a fencing plan. A ranch doesn't make a legacy. The hands that build it do. She read it twice, then closed the book. Outside, the wind had changed. It wasn't angry anymore. It was calm, carrying the scent of sagebrush and earth, the kind of wind that didn't warn it welcomed. The story of Red Willow Ranch wouldn't be one of fire and loss. Not anymore. It would be one of return, of standing ground not just against men, but against fear, of building something not out of pride, but love, brick by brick, day by day. Cole would stay. Alina would lead, and together, they would carry forward not just a name, but a way of life, a belief that what's worth keeping is worth fighting for, and that even in a place as hard as the West, mercy, dignity, and belonging still had a home. That as the last lantern was turned out that night, and the stars settled fully into the sky, Alina whispered a promise not to her father, not to Cole, but to the land beneath her boots. You were never just land. You were always hope, and the land, as if hearing her, held steady.